Go ahead and get started. I would now like to call the reconvened legislative meeting of June 11th, 2020 of the North Hills School District Board of Education to order. I'll begin by taking roll call. Ms. Kozera?
Here.
Mr. Little?
Here.
Dr. Nolish?
Here.
Ms. Philpott?
Here.
Mrs. Poniatowski?
Here.
Mrs. Reed?
Here.
Mrs. Rennebeck?
Here.
Mrs. Spade?
Here.
Mr. Witherall?
Here.
Dr. Manarino?
Here.
Dr. Williams?
Here.
Mrs. Matthew?
Here.
Mr. Muth?
Here.
Mrs. Pellet?
Here.
Mr. Kaufman?
Here.
I don't believe our student reps are here this evening. Mrs. Rieger?
Here.
And I am also present. I would like to announce that the board held an executive session on Monday, June 29th, 2020. Next, we will be moving on to public comments on agenda items only, and I just have a couple of things to say. First of all, to ensure that every resident, taxpayer, or employee of this district who wishes to speak has an opportunity, each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. It would be helpful if anyone wishing to simply concur with a prior speaker do so and not repeat what has been already stated. If you have comments about back to school related questions and you prefer, you may hold those comments until our second comment period at the end of this meeting, because some of your questions may be answered during the presentation. Mrs. Pellet will be running a timer and will alert you when you have 30 seconds and when your time is up. So I'll now read the public participation policy. We would like to invite any resident, taxpayer, or employee of the North Hills School District who wishes to address the board to come forward at this time. The board does reserve the right to limit the amount of time allotted for public discussion on any particular speaker and/or issue, and we will be limiting it to 3 minutes this evening. Some of your concerns can be quickly addressed following your comments, while others may require more research and discussion. When appropriate, you are welcome to further discuss your concerns with us following this meeting. We appreciate your interest, participants will be asked to state their name and address for the record. So if you do have any comments on agenda items this evening that you would like to make before any of the presentations, you can use the virtual raise hand feature in Zoom, and I will bring you up to speak. It doesn't seem that we have anybody at this time. I'll just give another minute. Okay, well, as I mentioned, there'll be a second opportunity at the end of the meeting. We will then move on to athletics and activities, and Mrs. Poniatowski.
Tonight we have a presentation on our return to play plan from Mr. Weber, our Director of Athletics.
Thanks, Katie. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Patrick Weber, the Athletic Director, and this evening I've been asked to present an overview of the health and safety plan that will be implemented by the district to return our students and staff to athletics and activities. Before getting started with my presentation, I do want to make you aware that the plan in its entirety will be made available on both the district and the athletics website. And the first slide here, obviously the athletic and activities department as well as the district hold the safety and the welfare of the athletes and the coaches and the staff in their highest regards. And we're going to follow all the CDC, the PA Department of Health, and the PDE, as well as the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association guidelines as it pertains to COVID-19. The big bullet here is the goal is for us not just to get started, and I've spoken to Dr. Manarino at length this, but the goal is to remain open and keep us playing and participating. some of the steps that we're doing is the athletic department and myself, we're holding a virtual coaches meeting to review all these necessary guidelines to all the practices resuming, and all the head coaches are encouraged to conduct a parent-athlete meeting, either virtually or in person, to go over these guidelines with our families. Just an overview of the plan requirements. Again, this is in direction from the state. These are the things that we would need included in our plan: the primary point of contact, how we will clean, sanitize, and disinfect and ventilate our areas, physical distancing and other safety protocols, monitoring student athletes and staff health, and then other considerations to keep our student athletes and staff safe, as well as professional development and the communications that we will be able to provide on all of this to the district constituents. The primary points of contact will be myself, as well as Mrs. Michelle Zimmerman, the Director of Activities. As far as cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting our areas, we're going to keep it consistent with the guidance that we've had from the state on the phased reopening of our schools. All of our facilities and storage areas, including the equipment, will be cleaned and disinfected at the end of each day. Students and all the athletes that will be using the weight room equipment, again, that's going to be wiped down in between each use, as well as before and after each group is using it. The next part you could see is, we are going to, Dr. Manarino, do you skip one there? There you go. That's all right. So as you can see, we're going to use a phased approach here in this plan. It's 4 phases, beginning tomorrow, July 1st, and it's in 2-week increments. As we go, we will take how each 2-week period and then progress on to the next one with different guidance. As we have a little bit further down on the slide there, a limitation in our gatherings. It is in 4 phases, takes us to August 9th, and then the 4th phase is when the state fall season begins on August 10th. I will skip the next bullet about the screening process because I do have more detailed and in-depth slides in the future. As you can see in phase 1, we will limit 25 participants per indoor space, and we are also going to follow currently the green guidance that we have in Allegheny County for 250 participants outdoor. In phase 2, you could see where that jumps up to 50 participants per indoor space and keeps that 250 outdoors. And then phase 3, hoping to get to that entire group, as well as where we would still be at 50% our occupancy of facilities. As we start, it's also recommended to our coaches and sponsors that the groups of students are placed together in smaller cohorts or pods to assist with limited contact, as well as to assist in contact tracing if that would be necessary. The last bullet on here is the staff and students must wear a mask at all times when in contact with other students and staff, where physical distancing of 6 feet cannot be maintained, obviously unless the activity is strenuous and would pose a medical condition or something else that necessitates otherwise where they couldn't do that. Moving into the next part, physical distancing and other safety protocols. It is going to be made clear that we don't want gathering or congregating of our students and our staff, whether they're arriving or departing from said activity. So we will limit that where there are specific pickup and drop-off guidelines. Students shouldn't arrive any earlier than 15 minutes before their scheduled practice or activity that they're going to, as well as when that is over, they're expected to depart immediately from that facility. The next part of the plan is visitors and spectators. And again, I think this will be ever changing, but the first tier is what we call essential, and that would be where we would start in our phase 1 and probably through phase 2 and possibly phase 3 until that changes from state guidance. But those essential participants would be our students, our adult supervisors, any event staff, medical staff, security, or officials. We would hope to obviously get to the second tier in hopes of, the parents of the student participants, and we deem that as essential. And then tier 3 would be non-essential, where it would be, tier 1. And again, that would be the addition of visitors and non-parental spectators. Those will be contingent upon the health conditions as we move forward. Moving on to the screening and the monitoring student athletes and staff health. This is important because we have a parent and a student waiver that is going to be put in place that we are going to require all students and parents and families to complete before the students are able to return to play, whether, again, whatever activity that is, athletics or any type of activity within the district. The screening protocol that we have put in place for students, the students must be screened. Again, we're asking for help from home at, their parent or guardian at home that can screen them and see how they're feeling. But they will also be screened by a supervising staff member at our facilities, again, for signs and symptoms of COVID-19 prior to any workout or even activity that they're going to. These screenings will include a temperature check and a completion of a questionnaire via a Google form. The responses to the screening questionnaire, again, it's just asking symptoms, and the temperature check, they will be recorded in a Google sheet that will be kept on file in the athletic office. And the only people that are able to see that information would be the coaches, myself as the athletic administrator or activities administrator, Ms. Zimmerman, as well as our athletic trainers who have helped tremendously to develop this plan. Our staff, they must self-monitor themselves. If they're feeling ill, please stay home. And, I think an overall message through this whole thing, if anyone is feeling ill, they need to stay home. That's more important, the health and safety of our community, than it is to miss a practice session or something that wouldn't be obviously such imperative. The next screen here is an example of what the COVID screen would look like for our students. Again, these were developed by our athletic trainers, asking the different symptoms, as well as the athlete or the participant's name. It is team specific or activity specific, as the coaches are only going to see their athletes, and then they're able to track all of their students, electronically, even helping them with attendance, that who was there and who was not. This is completed every single day before any activity session when they come in, just as they're entering, or sometimes I think some of the coaches had even talked about where they're going to do this before they get out of their car. So that is required before they get out of their car to participate. If for some reason one of the athletes do check yes to any of the symptoms, they are going to be asked to leave the facility if they are experiencing some of that. The next part here is just the illness protocol. And again, I did take this verbatim exactly from the overall plan. And again, I think that this is important for everyone to know. So again, an individual student or staff member displays any of these symptoms during any period, they will be removed from the group and masked if they're not already, and then isolated. Parent or guardian will be notified, and the chain of communication will begin, whether that's testing for COVID-19 is the recommendation or not. There was another document that was developed, the response protocol, that is a part of the bigger plan. Again, this is really talking with communication on if there was one of our students that would happen to do that. The staff is directed to contact myself as the point of contact, and then I will be in communication with our athletic trainers and medical staff, as well as Dr. Manarino, to determine the next steps. Obviously, if we get into a situation where someone is demonstrating these symptoms, we will look at the necessary paperwork for them to return. Along with this protocol is that our staff who are uncomfortable or unable, we can accommodate them as appropriately. And then obviously, if we get into a situation where a student or staff member will be confirmed with COVID-19, we would take the necessary steps and communicate that to our community. As part of the plan as well, it is asked that all of our coaches and our sponsors really review these topics that are on here, talking about cleaning and disinfecting protocols, the signs and symptoms, talking to our kids about hand washing, how to stop the spread of germs. The plan is to put signs about everyday protective measures and how to stop the spread of germs to keep everyone safe. And how are we going to communicate that, again, through our website, a virtual or in-person meeting, as well as email communication. Transportation and travel. Throughout the summer, it has been deemed that no transportation would be provided by the district during the summer break. Again, modifications for student transportation for in-season events, that may be necessary and will be determined by the district using the guidance that we get at a relevant time closer to that time. Modifications that may include, again, the reduction of number of students on the bus to achieve the distancing, using hand sanitizer. Students will be required to wear the mask on transportation, and then any other guidelines that would be needed. At this time, we're going to evaluate each event and follow all the local and state guidelines regarding travel on a case-by-case basis. Every consideration will be made not to expose students and staff to unnecessary potential high risk. There will be no overnight camps this summer. And the last bullet here, under the current conditions, all student and staff trips outside of the state or into the areas of the state with significant increase are strongly discouraged. We're asking our athletes and our students to talk with their coaches and sponsors about any types of vacations or trips that they are going to be going on in the near future, and communicate that with the coaches so then they could relay that to myself. And again, at that point, we will make a determination where they may be required to quarantine upon their return from those trips. The last piece of the plan here is moving to youth sports in the summer camps. As part of the plan, all coaches and sponsors of athletics and activities are required to submit to me their plan, sports specific, to return to play before even getting started. And they were using, obviously, the base plan here that we are discussing. But again, youth sports and summer camps, they will have the opportunity, again, the organizations within our community, they're going to be able to use our plan to develop their own specific guidelines and a plan that can be submitted to myself for consideration for approval to use our district facilities at this time. Once the school year begins, the use of our indoor facilities will not be permitted by outside organizations until further notice, and I believe that will be discussed a little bit later.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Does anybody from the board have any questions?
I do. When we move into phase 2, it says in the document that we can move to phase 2 after a 2-week period if community disease load is not rising, as per further guidance from the Allegheny County Health Department. So when parents are just kind of monitoring that, are we talking about, when we say community disease load, are we talking about in our school district? Are we talking about the county? And are we waiting? So we're waiting for the health department to tell us, yes, it's rising, you can't move to phase 2 or phase 3, or how will moving work?
That would be something I think that we would look at in our community as of right now. And I don't think that would be something we would wait for the health department to tell us that. That was just something we would monitor as we go. Again, I sort of broke it into 2 weeks just to see how things would get started and see how our families acclimate to this process, as well as keeping an eye on what the disease rate would be.
And then do we actually have any teams starting tomorrow?
There are a couple teams that do, and actually I know of 2 teams that would like to get started tomorrow. Our football team has expressed interest in getting started tomorrow evening, as well as Mr. Laval has expressed interest with the band to start tomorrow evening as well. Outside of that, a lot of our teams are waiting because of it's the holiday weekend, that they're waiting to start to July 6th.
And so all of the professional development for any coach that wants to get started, or band director, all the professional development has already happened?
So
Or
I did. I conducted actually a coaches meeting to give them a brief outline of what the plan was going to be. Obviously, without the plan being approved at that point, it is my goal to send the 26-page document of the full plan to them tomorrow or as soon as possible. But we did conduct a session yesterday to give them a brief outline so they could get started.
Thanks.
Mr. Little?
Mr. Weber, I want to thank you for joining us tonight and giving us that information. I just had two quick questions. I noticed when you were going through the plan, you had 4 phases. Phase 1 through 3, where North Hills phase is on the 4th one, it said PIAA. Are you saying that the plan that you put out encompasses phases 1 through 3, and once August 9th hits, it falls into the PIAA's plans? Is that correct?
So that is our belief at this time, that we would have those 3 phases leading up to August 9th. August 9th would be the cutoff again, because August 10th is the start of the PIAA official season, with football starting their heat acclimation period. So at that point, we hope to receive further guidance of how we could proceed.
Okay, thank you. And my last question was, we talked a lot about face masks. Undoubtedly, you mentioned that you talked to coaches, staff, and whatnot. What was the reception from those coaches and staff when we had these conversations specifically with those aspects of face masks?
They were really receptive, and I really put it on them as professionals, because that's really what they are, and we have them in these positions because we trust that they're going to do the right thing for our students. And I really put it and spun it the way that they need to be a role model for our kids. And again, that's the approach that we need to take and follow the guidelines. And that's what's going to have to happen, because if it doesn't, then unfortunately they're not going to be able to practice and do their activities.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have one quick question.
Yes,
Mrs.
Mrs. Reed.
There is my own Pat. Okay, my question is this. To get tested, does the recommendation come from our nurse or from a trainer if they believe they need to be tested for the coronavirus?
Sure. So within the plan, we have a response protocol that we had developed as sort of a flow chart. And really, I am not a medical professional. I don't pretend to be that. I would look for our athletic trainers to really point us in the right direction and have their conversations within the medical field to make that determination, as well as I think the family's primary care physician at that point.
Okay.
Dr. Manarino, if something would happen to change that we would need to update this plan, would the board need to vote on that again? I know Mount Lebanon passed it, they had to change it yesterday. Okay.
No, you wouldn't have to vote to change it. This is going to be an ever-flowing document as more information comes out from the situations that we're in, particularly in the county. So this plan is the plan that is basically the guidepost for us to submit to PDE so that we can begin our athletics and activities. But I think everybody knows that things might change. And that's one of the things that you noticed in a lot of the things that Pat said. We really have been working on this plan for weeks, and this looked a lot different a couple of weeks ago. And now as we enter this week and we're getting closer to the opportunity to participate, now we're beginning to see those numbers increase in the county, which is now making us a little bit more hyper vigilant on making sure that everybody is going to be safe if we're going to begin interactions in these types of activities. So that's sort of the way this plan is going to have to go, is that we're going to have to really think about things as the data progresses and as we get guidance and information from the CDC, Allegheny County Health Department, and as Pat already said, the PIAA. There's a PIAA meeting in the middle of July that's going to really focus on what fall sports is going to look like, and hopefully that there's going to be much more guidance coming out at that time if once we get to August, we have better direction. So this plan, unfortunately, is going to have to change, and I think it's a great plan. Pat did a great job putting it together with our coaches. I think we've covered a lot of the bases that we need to cover to make sure that everybody is safe and that we can begin activities. But at the same time, I know that Pat and the staff are going to be wise about what we're dealing with. And that I loved it whenever he talked about the goal is that this is not just to open and begin activities, but it's to remain open. And so in order to do that, it's to be able to make sure that we protect each other and that we do things that are wise about our decisions. And if we have to shut down, we shut down immediately so that we can make sure that we protect the health and safety of the students and the staff. So this plan, unfortunately, is going to have to change, but I think your question is, will the board have to approve it? And that's no. You're at this point, you're giving Pat, as the main point of contact for the athletics and activities plan, the opportunity to make those decisions as we go through the summer.
I just wanted to say that I'm really excited for athletics and activities to return, and I'm also really glad that the district is going to keep a close eye on what's happening locally and be prepared to respond accordingly if things change. And thank you, Mr. Weber, for all your work on this plan.
Thank you.
Mrs. Poniatowski, I'm going to hand it back to you.
All right. Again, thank you, Mr. Weber, and your team for all of the hard work that you put into this plan. We greatly appreciate it, and we can definitely see that you put the health and safety of our kids, our staff, and our coaches first, and we really appreciate that.
Thanks.
So the superintendent recommends, and I so move that the board approve athletic and activities item number 2, which is the return to play plan.
And I will second that, Dee Spade.
Thank you, Mrs. Spade. Is there any further discussion? There being none, I'll proceed with a roll call vote. Ms. Kozera? Ms. Frozen? We'll come back to Ms. Kozera. Okay, Mr. Little?
Aye.
Dr. Nolish?
Aye.
Ms. Philpott?
Aye.
Mrs. Poniatowski?
Aye.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mrs. Rennebeck?
Aye.
Mrs. Spade?
Yes.
I will also vote aye, and then I will ask Ms. Kozera one more time if she's able to vote. It appears that she is frozen and now she's gone. So motion carries. Thank you very much, Mrs. Poniatowski and Mr. Weber. You're welcome to stay or go on and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we will move on to education next, and Dr. Manarino will be giving us a presentation regarding the status of the district's health and safety plan.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Okay.
So basically, the same situation occurs for the reopening of schools, like Mr. Weber just went through, in that we have to develop a health and safety plan before the district can begin in-person instructional activities. And that's what our main focus has been over the last month, is putting together this plan, and so that we can get this plan submitted so that we can resume in-person instruction in the fall. The plans look a lot alike, but what I wanted to do tonight is talk about the update at this point. And all of these things in this plan is the preliminary guidance from the committee that we have working on this plan at this point. So when you look at our plan, there are some state requirements that we have to do. And the first part of the plan is that we have a reopening planning committee. One of the major things in there is to designate a pandemic coordinator, and I'm going to assume that role for next year so that all items about the health, safety, teaching, and learning as we go through the coronavirus crisis is going to go through me in my office. Also on this committee, I have teachers, administrators, and board members. And we basically decided, because of the length of this plan, is divided into 2 groups, because there are 2 main focus areas for our plan, and that's health and safety. And then the other group is working on teaching and learning. So when we focus on the health and safety plan, the health and safety plan is really built around the governor's 3 phases, which are red, yellow, and green. The governor has given us pretty strict guidelines as to what we can do in each of those 3 phases. And I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. But at the same time, our health and safety plan is going to be tailored to our personal district needs. And at all times, we're going to be in consultation with local health officials, the Allegheny County Health Department, the CDC, the PA Department of Health, and some of our local doctors in the area are also going to be a part of helping us through the health and safety plan. This plan, as with the athletics and activities plan, must be approved by the school board and posted on our district website. Tonight's presentation is really just to give everybody an idea of where we are at this point on June 30th. This plan will be something that will be approved on July 23rd as we're getting closer to the beginning of the school year. And then I'm going to talk about our operational plan for the first part of the school year and how that comes into play in this plan here a little bit later. But this, again, is just a preliminary guidance at this point. And the second part of this plan is the teaching and learning plan. And the teaching and learning plan was to focus on 180 instructional days. And at this point, it's extremely difficult because today is the day that all of the COVID relief from the state of Pennsylvania expires. And so once Act 13 expires, the 180-day and 990-hour mandate is still in play. And so as we enter into next school year, we have to be planning for 180 instructional days and 990 hours. If you can remember back to March, whenever the crisis first hit, our plan originally looked at using some flexible instructional days and kind of coasting into the Easter break because we had to meet the 180 days. And so once that provision was waived, we were able to do some things a little bit differently, and the district approved a different calendar. And last year's school year, we ended with 178 days, but because of this mandate relief, we weren't, we will not be fined in any way by the state government. But the problem with this year, as we lead into the 2021 school year, is that that relief expires. And I haven't heard much out of Harrisburg as to whether this mandate is going to continue, whether we're going to get relief, or what we're going to be provided to us as we get to August. So at this point, we are planning for 180 instructional days in our teaching and learning plan, and I'm going to explain what those are going to look like a little bit later. Our key considerations as we were building this plan was simple, and it sounds a lot like Mr. Weber's, and that's to continue in-person teaching and learning for the entire school year. That's our goal. We know that that's what we do best, is in-person teaching and learning. And so that our plan is to attempt to have an in-person teaching and learning environment and keep that for the entire school year. I'm not hoping to open and close as the time goes through the school year, but we're also preparing to do that as well. And that's what really tonight's presentation is going to be about as we get into it a little bit further. But just know that the goal is to get to in-person teaching and learning and continue in-person teaching and learning for as long as possible, knowing that the health, safety, and well-being of our students and staff is going to be held to the forefront at all times. We have been given some guidance from the Department of Education under mandates and guidelines, but there's not a whole lot of strict guidance coming from the Department of Education or the governor's office. The only thing at this point is that we have to do this plan. We have to address the protocols that we're going to put in place for the health and safety of everybody that's involved. And we have to determine what our instructional content or our instructional delivery is going to look like. But at the same time, we have to have 180 instructional days. And so that's a big challenge for us right now. We had a really nice report. The Regional Educational Laboratory and the Mid-Atlantic Mathematical Report findings came out with a lot of research that they did from across the globe. And with that, they come up with some pretty key findings that we're also trying to work through. And that's that we all know that under the current school closure plan that happened through March, April, and May, that there's substantial educational losses. And we also know that the burden that places when schools close on parents. The potentially detrimental issues that result with students because of social, emotional, and physical health by them being isolated or absent from the school setting and the normalcy that comes with schools being open. And I've been saying this for a long, long time, that virtual instruction is less likely to keep students engaged in learning. Although we did an incredible job in March, April, and May under very quick circumstances to get our virtual learning up and running without even having any idea that this was coming. But we also know that cyber education is a substandard education, and that we would prefer our students to be taught in the classroom with our great teachers in front of them every single day. And so that's something that comes out in this report, is that virtual instruction is less likely to keep students engaged and learning. So our studies are suggesting that children are less likely to be infected by this disease. And it's also showing that schools should prepare for reduction in overall student presence each day as we're in this virus conditions. So this is especially important for schools with class sizes and facilities that preclude 6 feet of separation among students and staff, and most certainly in counties that are transitioning from green to yellow. And so in our plan, and I said this many times with the committees that we met with, if you want to plan for opening day, we can certainly do that. But our goal is to plan for day 2 all the way through 180. And we have to be able to move in and out of different phases, whether it's virtual or hybrid or in person, based upon the conditions that we're faced with and the conditions that we're faced with in our county. in this plan, it talks a lot about things like to the extent possible. And when it talks about physical distancing, it'll say things like 6 feet to the extent possible. And I'm going to show you areas that it's just not possible based upon the structure that we have in our district, the size of the district, the size of our classes, the way, obviously, the buses are configured. At times, 6 feet of separation is just not possible. And I'll explain how we're going to handle some of those situations here. The best advice that we've been given is from the Allegheny County Health Department, and that's that we're actually trying to pull off something that's happening in 2 months, and that's just not feasible for the way we should be thinking right now. We should be thinking in terms of 2 weeks. Anything beyond 2 weeks from now is just something that we can't describe what it's going to look like. And I think that what's happening in Allegheny County over the last week is a clear indication. And I mentioned that whenever I talked about Pat's plan, that whenever he was working on this athletics and activities plan, he was planning for July 1st, which is tomorrow. But 2 weeks ago, July 1st looked a lot different to us. And now there's a little bit of a heightened awareness as to what's happening as those numbers are going up in our county. So that's where, trying to make a decision now about how we're going to open school is an impossibility, because there's going to be so many changes that are going to occur between now and then. The hopeful change for me is that this virus is gone by opening day and we're in school and back to normal and we keep going ahead, but I just don't think that's realistic either. But just know that we're thinking in terms of 2 weeks as we're making these decisions and not 2 months. So when you talk about the parent survey, we will be sharing the results after tonight's meeting, and you can see that the link is posted at the bottom of this slide here. That information was extremely useful to us and to the committee to make some of the decisions that we were making as we were building the health and safety plans, talking about when to open school, and all the things that came about with the questions that we asked. Extremely helpful. But that's also longer than 2 weeks ago. So we know that at this point, some of those decisions that parents made in that survey may change. And so we're going to share the results with the survey with you. They'll be posted again after tonight's meeting. But at the same time, a lot of these ideas we already know are going to change. State guidance, I think you all know what red, yellow, and green look like, because as we've lived through those so far. But when it comes to education, if the governor orders us in a green phase, which is where we currently are, we are permitted to resume in-person teaching and learning as long as we adhere to several PDE guidance and Department of Health and CDC guidelines, which that's what this presentation will be about. And that we have ideas for our physical distancing guidelines that will continue throughout. But the biggest part of green is that we can begin in-person teaching and learning. If our county would move to yellow, you can still continue in-person teaching and learning. It's just at a reduced capacity, as long as we adhere to, again, certain PDE and Pennsylvania guidelines. So this is where a hybrid model would have to take place if we were going to go with a reduced capacity. But at the same time, this hybrid model can also exist if we are in green, if the district is choosing to operate in a way that we're going to reduce capacities of students in the classroom. And I think we all know what the red phase is. We lived through the red phase in March, April, and May. That's 100% virtual instruction. That's that the school is closed, and we are most likely in a stay-at-home order in our county as well. So these are the 3 phases from the state. So once you take the 3 phases from the state, then we have to build our district operational plans. Our district operational plan is simple. We're hoping to go back to school in August under one of these 3 plans. You have traditional, hybrid, or virtual. These do not link to red, yellow, green. The only way they link to red, yellow, green is if the governor orders red, then we are absolutely 100% virtual. If the governor orders yellow, that is at a reduced capacity. At that point, we would have to either be virtual or hybrid. And then in a traditional teaching and learning, which would basically look a lot like March 1st of 2020, where we knew this virus was there and we were worried about it, but we were in full operation in the district. In that traditional teaching and learning, we will have much stricter protocols as far as health, safety, guidance, separation, and all of those things, which is going to come again about a little bit later in this plan. The North Hill School District will follow physical distancing and all other federal guidelines to the extent possible. It says to the extent possible all throughout the document. And again, I'm going to show you what our plans are in the areas that the extent is not possible, what our plans are for that. At any time, and this is one of the things that the governor required in this plan, is that if you as a parent would like a virtual option, that you are not comfortable sending your child back to school in a traditional or hybrid model, at that point, you can choose the online academy at North Hills. That will be the virtual option for parents and students if that's the option that they would like to choose from the first day of school. In the online academy at North Hills is that we've had this since 2006. The curriculum in the North Hills Online Academy is called Accelerated Education, and it is aligned to PA core standards. These students will absolutely be issued a North Hills School District iPad so that they can interact with their teachers in Accelerated Education. This is the only virtual option that will be offered by North Hills School District when Allegheny County is in yellow or green. The district is operating in-person instruction model, which is the hybrid or traditional. In order for us to appropriately schedule students and schedule teachers and plan for the opening day of school, we would need our families to register into the online academy if they're choosing the virtual option by August 10th. And the link right here, if you click on the link under the North Hills School District website, it will take you to our online academy where you can fill out the information that will go to Dr. Williams and we can begin the registration process. Because of the time that it takes for students to transition in and out of the online academy, there is a significant scheduling process that takes place. It's going to be difficult to move students in and out on a moment's notice. So at this point, there will be no moving in and out of the online academy until the 9-week breaks in the school year. So you can pretty much see where those are based upon our calendar and the way that's laid out whenever I show you the calendar. But this is the virtual option. So if you as a parent are just not comfortable sending your children back to school in person, whether we're virtual or whether we're traditional or we're hybrid, we do have the online academy. And again, we've had the online academy since 2006, and this is something that's not new to our district. At this point, I'm going to spend time about our health and safety plan. And in this health and safety plan, you're going to see it says hybrid and traditional because our health and safety plan is built for if we have in-person instruction. So if we have in-person instruction in a traditional model, we've got all students in the classrooms, all teachers teaching at the group of students at the same time. If we're in a hybrid, we're in a reduced capacity model, but we still have in-person instruction taking place. So when we talk about cleaning and sanitizing, whether it's hybrid or traditional, we're going to increase daily cleaning and sanitizing of all our buildings and spaces with EPA-approved disinfectants, paying special attention to high traffic areas and frequently touched surfaces. We're going to talk about wiping of desks and tables and the classroom materials throughout the day. We're going to increase cleaning and sanitizing of school buses. We're going to increase classroom ventilation and encourage opening of windows in our classrooms. And we're also going to encourage the use of outdoor spaces when possible by teachers so that they can go outside and do some instructional activities there if they felt that that was a necessary way to do their classes. The sharing of classroom materials will be limited. I think you know that we're buying a fleet of iPads for all of our students K-12. Computer keyboards and other shared materials that we can't limit will be disinfected and wiped between uses, and we're also going to increase the use of UV lighting in order to disinfect areas that that is permissible. We'll always use the use of disposable gloves, safety goggles, cooking gloves, and those types of things in hands-on activities like high school wood shop, metal shop, our family and consumer science classes, those types of things where we again know sharing is going to be difficult to limit. I think if you paid attention to some of our school board meetings, you might know that we're eliminating the water fountains in the schools and replacing all of our water fountains with water bottle filling stations so that we can, again, protect the health and safety of students so they're not drinking out of the same water fountain as other students as the day progresses. A big part of this plan is to focus on good health and good hygiene. And we've talked a lot about the fact that this is not just about the coronavirus, but when students come to school, they begin to get sick. They get colds, we get the flu, we get strep throat, and we get those types of things that happen. So our nurses are developing and will be posting and sharing hygiene best practices guidelines for our staff. And we're going to educate our students and families about the importance of hand washing and those things that help us to stop the spread of diseases. Communication and signage will be placed in our classrooms, in our hallways, and in many places in the school as we can to reinforce these good hygiene practices and hand washing techniques. Additional sanitizing stations will be added to each one of our classrooms so that when students enter the classroom, there will be a hand sanitizing station so that they can wash their hands prior to taking their seats in the classrooms. Schedules will be adjusted to accumulate additional time for hand washing and sanitizing as well. And then students and staff, again, we have to really talk about protecting the community. So students and staff need to stay home when they're sick. And parents are going to need to continue to monitor and communicate with their school nurse about what symptoms they're seeing with their children. And this is something that's difficult for me as a parent as well, because just because your children have a 100-degree temperature does not mean they have the coronavirus. And so that's where monitoring their symptoms, monitoring what's happening to them health-wise, and communicating with the nurse is going to be extremely important. So when it comes to physical distancing in our hybrid and traditional models, what we've decided to do is make all desks facing the same direction so that we could spread them out as far as we possibly can. Our desks will be spaced as far apart as possible. And when you read the World Health Organization guidelines, the World Health Organization places anything 3 feet or beyond reduces the exposure of risk to the coronavirus to 80%. In our classrooms, as we've spread, again, desks apart, the distance is now no less than 4 feet in the traditional model. But if we would have to go with a hybrid model where we would go with the reduced capacity, you can see that 6 feet would then become a greater possibility. And it's just a simple math equation. So if we had 24 students scheduled to a classroom, and you know that I can get them already 4 feet apart, if we're going to split that to 12 students, I'm going to be able to capture that extra space that we can get them to be 6 feet apart, as there's a reduced number of students in that classroom that day. We will be removing all unnecessary furniture, area rugs, bookshelves, cabinets, and those types of things that are in our classroom so that we can maximize the amount of space for our students as well as maximizing the teaching space for our teachers. Most shared spaces have been eliminated. And the example that I have here is that when we renovated the high school, the English department and the world language department chose to go with desks and chairs, or I'm sorry, tables and chairs. And those tables are 4.5 feet long. And there's no way in any configuration that you can get those students within separated by 3 feet or more. And so we've purchased individual desks for our English classrooms and our world language classrooms so that we can then get that physical distancing that we need in those spaces. And so where it says most shared spaces are eliminated, there are just some things that we can't eliminate. The way our computer labs are set up, we're not going to be able to reconfigure computer labs because of the power, the electricity, the devices, and the things that they have as those rooms are set up. That's why it says most shared spaces have been eliminated, and most tables have been replaced with desks, because there's some tables that we just can't replace with desks. The next part of this is really going to get into the individual building plans, and that what you're seeing tonight is the overall district plan that's going to be given to the principals actually tomorrow so that they can begin to work on these ideas as they impact each of their individual schools. And we want to talk about, is one-way directional signs, one-way hallways, is that a possibility in our schools? And it might be possible in some, and it may not be possible in others. But if we can improve traffic flow and ensure physical distancing in the hallways by going with one-way hallways, that's something that the principals are going to look at in their buildings. Same thing with the staggering use of communal spaces in hallways. Having designated arrival and dismissal procedures to ensure safe physical distancing is maintained as students again arrive and are dismissed from our schools. And then the big part that for the time being, that we're going to have no non-essential visitors or classroom volunteers permitted until further notice. And this is to keep, again, the health and safety of our students and staff in check. So this is something that was really debated over the last couple of weeks. And I think as you know, the research is coming out more and more this week, is the importance of wearing a face mask. And so at this point, face masks will be required for all students and staff members at all times when in school while not eating. Face masks will be required for all students when on district transportation. This is extremely important for us to protect the adult staff in the building, to protect the students from transmitting the disease to each other, getting it transmitted to their parents, their grandparents. And again, on the bus, I think you know that our bus drivers are more of the elderly population, and they are the group that's getting sick and are in danger. And so we need to protect them, which is the reason why that students will be required to wear face masks while they're on district transportation and while they're in our classrooms. If we would unfortunately get an outbreak of multiple teachers coming down with the coronavirus in any of our schools, you can imagine how long that school is going to have to be shut down. I think you all know from the past that there's a sub shortage in the state of Pennsylvania for teachers to begin with. And I don't think it's going to get any easier for us to get substitute teachers under this crisis. So we really have to protect the health and safety of our teachers, as well as the health and safety of our children. And I think I've said this already, that they may not be carriers of the coronavirus, but I know that they're carriers of the cold, the flu virus, and those other illnesses that come along with students being in school. And if you look at any of the research, when you begin to mix all these viruses together, that the potential for us to be unfortunately back to red exists if we don't do the things that help us to keep each other safe and healthy. When you talk about cafeterias and common spaces, We're going to increase the spacing of cafeteria tables and chairs. We're going to utilize the hallways if necessary to ensure that the students can maintain a safe physical distance while they're in the cafeterias and common spaces. Tables and chairs will be cleaned and sanitized between lunch periods. Students will be encouraged to bring their own lunch, and this will allow us to make a grab-and-go meal whenever possible to speed the delivery and to avoid lines as much as possible in our cafeterias. Students who do purchase our lunches will be allowed to go through the lunch line only once. So the way it was before we went into this crisis was that students could go back and get a dessert or a snack or milk or anything after they've already purchased their meal. But in order for us to make sure that we can get the students through safely and then clean that space before the next group comes through, then we're going to have to go with no second trips through for additional snack purchases. The shared condiment replacement, that'll be replaced with condiment packets. I think we all understand that the whole shared condiment idea is going to be gone for all of us at any event that we ever go to, and that's going to happen in our cafeterias as well. We're going to be replacing those shared condiment stations with condiment packets for students. We're going to be able to shorten the serving time for breakfast to allow thorough cleaning before our lunch periods. And then at this time, there'll be no assemblies or field trips as part of the cafeterias and common space use. So right now, the big one for us is working on protocols for recess and physical education. And those are under development, but I can tell you right now that at no time is there any discussion about recess or physical education being canceled, cut, or not offered in any way. We're working on protocols to make sure that those activities can be handled in a safe and appropriate manner, but they will take place. So with the transportation, the one survey question that was very helpful to us, and that's the reason why I put the pie chart on here, is that we asked, are you willing and able to transport your child to and from school to reduce the number of students on school buses? I think you know and understand that getting students 3 feet from each other on a school bus is an impossibility. And the plan, as I said before, says to the extent possible. So students will be physically distanced to the greatest extent possible, and to the greatest extent is going to be no more than 2 students per seat on a school bus. Our normal capacity on our 84 passenger buses is that we're scheduling buses somewhere around 64 to 68 students. Well, we're going to cut that capacity to 56. There are 28 seats on a school bus. That's 2 per seat. But the information about parents transporting their child to school is extremely helpful to us. And so if you are willing and you are able to transport your child to and from school, that's really going to help us to reduce the capacities on our buses. And it's really going to help us to get the physical distancing that might actually help us to keep our students and drivers safe during this time. We are going to have assigned seats on the bus based upon when you enter the bus. It's as simple as the students that are picked up at the first bus stop will go to the back of the bus, and the bus will load from the back to the front as we get closer to the school. Most of our routes happen in the opposite direction. So that would be the student's assigned seat on the way home, because that student that was last picked up on the way to school is normally the student that is first dropped off on the way home from school. So that group of students we would want at the front of the bus so that they can exit the bus first as we progress through our routes. We're going to, in that assigned seats, we're going to have siblings sit together as much as possible. And then again, I've already stated that masks will be required at all times to protect each other and to protect our drivers. We're developing a form this summer for parents to basically opt out of the transportation so that we know that during this time that the parents who are willing and able to transport their kids, that we know who they are, and that we can make sure that we don't assign those students to a bus. But at the same time, we also need to know the number of parents that are going to be driving their children to our schools so that we can handle the logistics of car traffic at each of our schools as we get into the arrival and dismissal procedures for the schools. So that's why it's going to be very important for us to know how many parents can and who those students specifically are. When you get to the monitoring of the student health and safety plans, it's real simple. I think we've all kind of know and understand what we're looking for based upon whether we've even gone to a doctor's office lately or had our hair cut. They're asking you for your symptoms, your history of exposure. And with this one, this is a community issue. And this is where I'm asking for the parent help in this shared responsibility. That there is no way that we can take the temperatures of students. I've looked at all kinds of different advanced technologies, and none of them can give us a reliability to being able to take the temperatures of every student that enters our building every day. It's just not possible, but I know it's possible as a parent that I can take 3 temperatures of the children that live in my household and make sure that they do not have a temperature, at least know and understand that they're healthy before they walk out of the house. Not that I have to take their temperature every day, but are they healthy? Do they have any symptoms? Are they having any sicknesses at all? And if they're sick, please keep them home. And that's going to be very important for us to keep, again, the schools open for as long as possible and to maintain the health and safety of everybody. In here, that it says that the attendance policy is being reviewed to accommodate absences. That's something that we will have presented on the 23rd. We are making some adjustments to the attendance policy because we know how important school attendance is, but we also know how important school attendance is if a student gets sick and then they're out for a long period of time. And so we're trying to limit those types of illnesses by making sure we monitor our students' health and safety while they're at home before we send them to school. If your child is ill, please keep them home. The teachers have also been communicated that if they're sick, please stay home. It's just going to be able to help and benefit all of us. Staff will undergo some trainings about the symptoms and the responses and the exposure protocols at the beginning of the school year. Students and staff with symptoms during the school day must report immediately to the nurse's office where they will be isolated if necessary. As part of our plan, we have to have an isolation area identified for every one of our schools in the event that we get a student or a staff member that we believe has the virus. We have to place them in an isolation area until they can either be picked up by a parent or until the staff member can either be transported home safely or that somebody can come and get them or they can drive on their own. And we are at this point developing added protections for high risk and immunocompromised students and staff members as a part of our plan. So in the case of a coronavirus outbreak in the North Hills School District, we will immediately consult Allegheny County Health Department and we will contact the CDC for their guidance. They've notified us that if they're notified of cases that exist within our school district, that they will also contact us. So that's going to be a two-way street for us to contact them. If there's somebody that we find out or that we're suspecting has the disease, and then they're going to contact us if they have the information on their end. If we do have that information, we will send communications to families and staff members through normal means of communication with email, website, social media, and at all times we're going to follow local, state, and federal guidance on any type of return to school plan. And I think that you can understand this is why when I talked about operational plans of the district, we have to be prepared to go full traditional, hybrid, or virtual, because if we get a major breakout in one of our schools, that school might be placed into a virtual environment based upon the recommendations of the Allegheny County Health Department. So when I talk about planning for 180 days, that's why we have to plan for 180 days and be able to move in and out of different plans as this school year progresses. So what's a hybrid model? So basically the way the hybrid model is going to work for us is that we would split students into two groups. There will be an A group and a B group, and this will most likely be divided based upon alphabet. I don't know right now what those divisions are going to be, but in my own mind, it's an A through L group A, it's an M through Z group B, and those students come to school at alternating days. The way our plan is set up is that it would be 2 in-person instructional days and 3 virtual instructional days for each group each week. And so what you're looking at is 2 different versions of that. If we go with a hybrid at this point, I'm not real sure which one we're going to go with. We're still talking to the members of our committee about which model that we believe is the best for teaching and learning if we have to do some sort of virtual environment. And so just real quick, in the first option, if you're a group A student, you would be in person on Monday and Thursday. You would be virtual Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. And if you're the B group, you're virtual Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and you're in person Tuesday, Friday. And the other model is a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday model. And so if you're A in this group, you're virtual Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're in person Thursday and Friday. And in B, you're in person Monday, Tuesday, you're virtual Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Again, this was something that we had asked in the surveys, and we've dismissed the alternate weeks idea. We've also dismissed the Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week, Tuesday, Thursday next week. We talked a lot about teachers having the opportunity and the ability to plan for virtual lessons while they also have students in person at the same time. So you can see how difficult it might be on Monday. If I'm a social studies teacher, I have a group of my students that are in person, but I also have a group of my students that are in a virtual environment as well. And I've got to maintain both of those because, as I said at the beginning, we do not have a waiver. All of our days must meet the 180-day requirement, and they must meet a 990-hour requirement. So there's a lot of work that would need to take place in order to make these virtual days happen, which is why we looked at 1 day a week would be completely virtual, so that would allow teachers to prepare virtual instruction. But at the same time, it would allow our custodial maintenance staff to do a deep, thorough clean of the building because you would have nobody in the building on those days. At this point, we don't have a determination of what schedule we would go with. We're still working on that. And that's why, again, this is a preliminary plan or an update, and more information of that will be happening as we get closer to July 23rd, where we would need to make a decision on this plan and ultimately, before we get to the opening of school. This is the action item for tonight, is the school calendar. It was very helpful in the survey to find out that families wanted us to keep the August 25th opening day. And so that's what this calendar is. And you can see it's the pink date is the first day of school. It is August 25th. That is no different than the current calendar that we have already approved. So the district will begin instructional activities on Tuesday, August 25th for students. However, the first day for teachers is going to move from August 18th to August 13th. And this is going to allow us for additional professional development days as we prepare to enter into this new environment. You've heard me talk a lot about different safety and security protocols, different cleaning protocols, different information about how we communicate the disease to students and how we manage the health and safety of each other. There's a lot of professional development that has to happen before we can open schools. And that's where we added the professional development days at the front of this calendar. As we go through the school year, I cut 2 vacation days because of the way this calendar ended up. It ended up with the last day for students to be on Wednesday, June 2nd. And so instead of us coming back after Memorial Day and going 2 days, I just cut them back and went to Thursday, Thursday, May 27th would be the last student day. That makes graduation Friday, May 28th. And then we have the Memorial Day weekend. So this calendar, actually, the way it's designed and built, has our students enter on the same day, but leave on the Thursday before Memorial Day. We've added a couple of Act 80 days into this. And so this is the action item for tonight, is the school calendar, and for parents and students to begin instructional activities on the same day. That instruction was designed to begin in our current calendar that we have approved. And this just backs the start up for the teacher so we can take care of that professional development. And then, so what's next is the ability for folks to give us their feedback about what we're doing with this plan, what your thoughts are, what direction we should be going, because as we get to July 23rd, we are going to have the phased reopening plan approved by the school board so that we can really start to begin to talk about beginning in-person instruction. That plan is a lot like the athletics plan that was just approved. It's just a lot more detailed and a lot more in depth, but it is a plan that is required by us to be delivered to the Department of Education before we can begin in-person instruction. Part of that plan talks about our operational plan. And if you recall, I said that we should be thinking in 2-week terms, not 2-month terms. So even on July 23rd, I don't think it's going to be wise for us to make a decision about how the district is going to open, whether we're going to open full virtual, whether we're going to open in a hybrid, or whether we're going to open in a full traditional model. We're going to save that announcement for August 6th so that at that point we are at least 2 weeks closer to the start of the school year. That gives us an opportunity to see what's happening over the summer, see what the data is doing in our communities, see what direction the governor has placed our county, and hopefully we're still in green. But that gets us closer to the start of school to make a really good decision about what operational plan we're going to open in, again, whether that's full traditional, hybrid, or virtual. And that's the presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to allow the board members to ask any questions, but I just wanted to thank you for all the work that you've put into this plan. It's definitely a lot to take in. I think that we're all really aware that the decisions that we make for the school district are going to impact the entire community. In my opinion, not in my opinion, this is a public health issue, and I believe it's very important we listen to the recommendations from the experts. So while I would love to be able to announce for parents how what school is going to look like for the fall today, I believe that we are still in a very fluid situation, and I think it's in our best interest to wait until the beginning of August, as you outlined, and carefully evaluate what the local caseload is at that time, alongside the CDC recommendations and the recommendations from the Allegheny County Health Department. Does anybody else from the board have any comments or questions on the presentation? Sandy.
Hey, yeah, well, first I just want to comment, this is really hard. It's hard to hear, it's hard to think about, it's hard to listen. It's a struggle. And just while I was listening to the presentation, I was thinking it might be helpful when we have something to vote on to have some sort of visual like flow chart incorporated in, because it's it's all just a lot of words right now, and I'm kind of understanding it to be sort of like a, if we're in yellow, this is what happens. If we're in green, this is what happens. And I think I believe there's one in the health and safety plan for the athletics and activities, and I think I think it'd be really helpful to kind of digest it if there's a visual. Does that make sense? Is that something that we could maybe consider doing?
We've absolutely talked about that, so that there's a communication document that we're working on that is a little more visual than just, like you said, words on a slide. There is a lot to this plan. It's a lot of pages with a lot of areas that we had to cover, and the presentation was just to kind of show the level of detail that we had to go and the way that we're thinking about things in order for us to begin instruction. But once we go to communicate this out, we have a better idea of how it's going to be communicated. So PDE has a summary page at the end of it. We will absolutely fill out that summary page, but it's not the greatest. It just takes the same words that we had and just pares them down a little bit. But we have an idea for a better document to be communicated out once we get there. And that's why, again, tonight's plan was preliminarily. This is what we're thinking. If you approve the calendar, school starts in 2 months. We've got July and August. A lot of things can change between now and then, but we will be working on a much better way to communicate this out so that you can see it and understand it beyond the massive amount of work we had to put in to deliver this to the state. Cliff Notes version coming.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board on this? Mr. Little.
Yeah, Dr. Manuel, I just want to thank you and the team who put this together. This isn't easy. I think it's incredibly obvious, but it's tough. You mentioned in that there's been little oversight or help from the state level Department of Ed, and when you're out there on your own having to make these decisions, it's tough. I just want to say thank you and to that team for putting this together.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments from board members this time on this presentation? No? Okay, thank you, Dr. Manarino. We'll move on to the action item then. We have one action item, which is a request for the board to approve the revisions to the 2020-2021 academic calendar as described by Dr. Manarino and as attached to the public agenda. The superintendent recommends, and I so move, that the board approve education item 2.
This is Dee Spade, and I'd like to second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Spade. Is there any discussion? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote then. Ms. Kozera?
Aye.
Mr. Little?
Aye.
Dr. Nolish?
Aye.
Ms. Philpott?
Aye.
Mrs. Poniatowski?
Aye.
Mrs. Reed? Mrs. Reed?
Sorry, yes, I was on mute.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Mrs. Rennebeck?
Aye.
Mrs. Spade?
Yes.
And I will also vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Manarino. We have one item for discussion under support services this evening. Ms. Philpott.
Yes. So earlier this evening, we discussed the activities plan for activities that are run by North Hills School District. So as part of the return to school plan, Dr. Manarino and the committee working to put that plan together have asked us to discuss as a board and provide guidance regarding after school programs that are not a function of the North Hills School District operations. So I will open that up for discussion. Dr. Manarino, I don't know if you want to kick us off with a little description.
Yeah, I actually have a slide prepared that I want to show you sort of what the thinking is and why the thinking is kind of leading, in my mind, that discussion, and then we can have the discussion. So I am going to share my screen for a brief moment. So when we talk about the buildings and grounds plan in this, if we're back to school in an in-person environment, I'm really concerned about the amount of time it's going to take for our custodial maintenance staff to thoroughly clean our buildings and prepare our buildings for students and staff for the next day. And that's whether it's traditional or whether it's hybrid. And so that's why I'm asking for a little bit of direction on this so that we can then provide direction to the community organizations that utilize our buildings. I've always wanted our buildings to be the hub of the community, and I think we've done a nice job of providing that. But unfortunately, I think we're in different times right now, and that there's some of the things that might just have to sit in the background for a little bit until we get to the other side of this crisis, so that we can make sure that the health and safety of our students and staff are taken care of, and that we can continue to deliver our in-person instruction for as long as we possibly can. And so what I'm kind of thinking is that indoor events and activities that are run by outside organizations during and after school not be permitted until further notice, until we kind of have a better understanding of what we're dealing with, so that we can give our custodial staff the best opportunity to make sure that our facilities are prepared for the next day. I also know and understand completely that the child care and after school programs run by the YMCA, I think those need to continue. Those are vital. If we are going to be an in-person instruction, our parents have shown that they need our help in maintaining some sort of child care opportunity at our school to allow them to get to their children after work or before they have to get to work. So I think that we continue with the morning care program, aftercare programs, but we have to add added health and safety precautions and maybe limit their spaces within the school building, so that we can, again, make sure that we get the building cleaned to the best possible way. I think at this point we go no parent teacher group sponsored events, no back to school socials. I can tell you as the superintendent, I don't believe that open house for next year is going to look like the open houses of the past. I think we cancel open house as we once knew it, where we had 500, 600, 700, 1,000 people converging on our buildings to meet their teachers. Look at the student work that we've had hanging on the wall. It's a wonderful event. It's something that I always love having and going to, but I just don't think we're realistic thinking that can happen this school year. There are plans for the district, with our celebration of learnings, our open house, our curriculum nights. We also know that it's extremely important to have orientation for kindergarten, to have orientation for our new 6th and 7th graders going to the middle school, and for our new 9th graders going to the high school. Those orientations are very important to the success of our students in those buildings, that our building logistic committees are going to work on those. But the main discussion for tonight is, are you comfortable with us shutting down open house as we once knew it? Are you comfortable with us eliminating indoor events and activities run by outside organizations during and after school until further notice, until we have a better understanding of where we are? And the whole focus of this is really simply to make sure that we get the best opportunity to clean our facilities before we prepare, as we're preparing for the next day. So these are my thoughts in those 3 key areas as we're building some important things. But I think this is something that we have to communicate out to our groups sooner rather than later, so that they know if they have to find a different space, whether it be a church or another location in the community for some of the groups to meet, because our school facilities would not be available. I think we owe it to them to let them know that, again, sooner rather than later.
But just to be super clear, when you're speaking about outside organizations, this also includes the parent-teacher organizations at the elementary level, and would include programs such as the after-school clubs and dance programs that they host. Just so everybody's on the same page about that.
So with that, what outside organizations operate in our middle school and high school? So I know we're talking about all the PTO, PTSO, PTA activities, but what else? Do you know what we would be looking at?
Pat Weber, do you have a good idea about some of the things that happen in the high school, middle school? Because a lot of those are athletic related. Jerry, if you might know any of the organizations through our the building permit system that we have, that type of thing.
Off the top of my head, I can think of obviously our elementary basketball program. Some of those groups that use our gyms, mainly, throughout the winter. I know that some of our youth programs use our facilities in the high school for, the pool, and some of those other things where we might have an outside event, where people are renting that out. Off the top of my head, those are the ones that stick out, but there are others.
And
I know that we have groups that, ask us to use our auditorium at the middle school and the high school for different events that they might have. Groups that come in and use our gyms for different events that they might want to have. And so those are some of the things that we're talking about for the time being, just eliminating, so that we can make sure, again, that we have the ability to clean and make sure that those facilities are prepared for students for the next day. That's the focus. I've said it 10 times. But
What
that's the
about like
reason
the
why
NHIPA and the marching band? Would that fall under this?
that the marching band is a school activity, so that would not.
Okay.
Community swim would be one.
Yeah. And that's something that I think each one of those are going to have to be on a case-by-case basis. If you're talking about community swim, I need to see what our phys ed curriculum is going to look like as opposed to swimming before we would make a decision about whether we would let them in or not. I don't see that being a hard no, because that is a place that they could come in and we could make sure that that's cleaned and maintained before we have a group of students in the next day. So that's one that I don't know. That's, again, why this is part of having that discussion. But, you know, I do know that we have groups sometimes come in and use our classrooms for meetings. And that's the type of things that we can't have that. And so those are the examples that, are coming to my mind. I know that we've had adult symphony groups, adult bands come and rent our facilities so that they could perform in our auditoriums. And those are the things that I just think for the time being, we should not be doing.
But our outside fields and whatnot, those would still be open? You're only suggesting our indoor?
Yeah, my main focus at this point is we're in school, we're in operation, and I've got to clean the space for the next day. And having traffic and activity in those buildings until 8, 9, 10 o'clock just makes it an impossibility for our custodial staff to do their due diligence of making sure that that space is as clean as possible before the students arrive the next day.
I'm struggling with this both because it's really depressing and also because I've been at my kids' school for a lot of after school activities, and I would certainly defer to the maintenance staff, but I mean, they're cleaning while there are students there. And I'm wondering if there's some way to, put a time limit or something, put some sort of limitation on the availability of the rooms and the clubs and that sort of thing. I mean, I've, at Ross, they have the YMCA in the cafeteria, they have Ross Dance in the auditorium, and they have it gated off so that all the rest of the school is closed, and they're actively cleaning that while the kids are there doing those activities. Granted, I've only been there as late as like 6:15. I know those activities go on later, but there are, there's chess club, for example, and that's, very few kids in a room. They're done by, I think, 5 or 6. And it just seems, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think I agree that we should focus on education, and I don't want to unduly burden our maintenance staff because I know they're going to have a lot to do. But I'm not in favor of just unilaterally saying, let's not have any indoor clubs. I would like to discuss it a little bit more.
And one of the things,
but I think that we're also going to come down to deciding who is who, because you could have people at an elementary level saying, like you brought up the chess club, or certain organizations are going to say, well, what about me? So it's going to come down to, what is the criterion that we decide what you do and don't do? I mean, I get it. It comes down to a cleaning factor, but go ahead.
The groups that I've spoken to directly, which are the parent-teacher organizations, are really looking for some clear and consistent guideline across the district from us. And I think that we owe it to them. Yeah, whatever that clear and consistent guideline may be, I think that we should provide it for them.
One of the things that I'm struggling with is that, and maybe there's a difference that I'm not getting here, but for example, let's just go with the elementary Kids of Steel program. So we might be telling them that we can't do that because you're using our gym after school hours, but yet we're going to run basketball for the middle school and high school. So I don't know what the difference is. Is there one? Are we just trying to limit?
What basketball would you be talking about though? Are you talking about youth basketball, or are you talking about PIAA, WPIL sanctioned middle school athletics and activities?
Right, I'm talking about our district athletics. So at what point, I mean, if we're going to allow district sponsored athletics and activities, then why not parent organization activities? And I'm really just looking for the discussion about it, because I don't see why we cut those if we can still have district sponsored things.
I
Dr.
believe,
Manarino, can I speak, or
Yeah, you don't have to ask permission.
I don't know if this is something to consider though. Whenever we're talking about our teams and things like that, they are our coaches and we're hiring them as a district. I don't know if that's something different where we're looking where these are parents and outside volunteers that are running some of these programs. I think that could be something to take into consideration.
Sure.
And that's sort of what I was going to say, is that as a part of the district operations, we have athletics and activities, which is a part of the plan that was just approved. So there are athletics and activities as sponsored by the district. And then there's outside organizations that utilize our facilities. And I think that what this is talking about is limiting the outside organizations from utilizing the facilities. Maybe Sandy's got the right idea, that maybe that we don't exclude it completely, but it's like a curfew of 6 o'clock or something like that, that we could still provide the opportunity, but at the same time, we've got to provide the best opportunity for our staff to clean that building thoroughly without students and parents being there.
Pat,
I worry that the more the buildings are used, and like if somebody even from our district, tests positive for COVID, what does that mean? Do we have to shut the whole school down because, somebody was hosting, I don't mean to pick on it, whatever, but like a Girl Scout meeting,
right.
And my daughter is a Girl Scout and I love the Girl Scouts, so I'm not picking on the Girl Scouts.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have less control over outside groups, right? I mean, like Pat Weber was saying, it's not, it'll be people in our building that are not, coaches that we've hired. So they're, it could be different standard. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I just hate to say we're not going to do it, at least without talking about it and thinking if it's feasible a little bit more. And I agree that, whatever we come up with absolutely has to be consistent among all the schools. So that's, that's something we need to work toward.
Mrs. Reed?
I think the easiest way to handle this, when people aren't going to like it, is that we have to just be firm and think of our own students who we're trying to protect. And we do not rent it out to anybody. The only ones that can use our facility would be our own students with our own coaches. The rest of it, it's a shame, but it's not worth the aggravation and possibly being exposed to something. I think we're opening up a can of worms.
This is not something that the board would normally vote on, so you're looking for guidance and you're not getting it.
Yeah, I'm looking for guidance as a part of the plan. And so even I know it's difficult. It's the first time we've really even mentioned this as you're starting to unravel the plan a little bit too. And so I just really need to know by July 23rd, as we're putting that plan in place, what this piece of that puzzle looks like so that we can appropriately communicate it out. Again, this is a part of the health, safety, and cleaning plan and limiting access to our buildings. And that's where the no volunteers comes in, the no essential guests come in. That's part of the plan that, I was pretty comfortable saying that that's the way we were going to operate our schools when the school year started. But this was the one area that I was not comfortable just saying that this is what we were going to do. And I wanted your input because I know you're all connected to those folks in the community that need us and use us for their programs. And their programs, every one that was mentioned, is extremely important to us. It's why we've opened our doors to them for so long. It's extremely important to our kids and the things that they get to do. Unfortunately, we're in a different time as we walk into August. My main goal is to open school and keep it open, keep everybody healthy and safe. And the only way that we're going to do that is be able to clean the space. And this gives our staff the best opportunity to clean it. And I hate even feeling like we've got to shut people out of our buildings, because that's something that I've wanted our buildings to be more open. And so it's really hard for me personally and as the superintendent of the district, but I think that's what we should be doing. But like I said, I wasn't prepared to just say, this is the way it's going to be, put it on that piece of paper as we were working through our health and safety committee.
Well, if we give them enough notice, they might be able to find an alternative location for some of these events like the community center or churches, or maybe some of them can be relocated outside. Maybe you could have,
Yeah.
you know.
Mr. Marina,
Yeah. Am I good to go?
Mr. Little and Mrs. Spade, yes.
Thank you, Madam President. I was just spitballing, but thinking, what if we deferred to each individual group asking, can you have your program or activity outside rather than being inside? Then leave it them. If they say yes, you know, we may have outside space, and then thus not keeping as many clubs inside. Again, I don't know what that number is, but maybe it's greater than we believe.
Mrs. Spade?
I just wanted to say that I agree with Mr. Manarino on trying to limit the amount of outside people that come into the building. As a past employee, people come in and we don't know what they do in their life or where they've been. We know where our teachers have been, and we know basically where our kids have been. They've been in our school and in their home. And there's even kids that come in that don't go to our schools. I just think until we have a better handle on what is going on with this virus and how we are going to stay open, we need to limit who enters our buildings. I really believe that, so we can keep it clean and safe for the people that are here.
If
Any additional comments?
how often would we be able to revisit this sort of, I mean, I don't know, obviously none of us know what's gonna happen, but is this the kind of thing that we could do revisit every 3 months? Like if we start out and say there's no outside groups, then we could revisit it in December.
I'd be happy to talk about it at every board meeting, because again, with the health department telling us that we need to think about this in 2-week terms, a decision that we make now might be completely different for the first day of school. Okay, so the decision that we make on August 20th or August 6th, we're going to shut it down. No one's in, and we get to the September board meeting and the numbers are different. That maybe we can make things, you know, open things up at that point. I just think if we stick to that, try to make decisions in 2-week increments, we have a better chance of getting this right. So that's where, and we could do this every board meeting to say, is anything changed that we would want to open up the facilities or whatever it might be. And I think we'll be able to know that as we see the data coming in front of us, and as we again have students and teachers interacting in an in-person environment in our schools. That's going to tell us a lot about what's happening with our operations. Obviously, if we get to a point where we've got to shut down and go virtual, the buildings are closed anyways. We've already lived that. That's March, April, and May of 2020. And so that's, again, this is a lot of like what we said about Pat Weber's plan. This is ever changing, ever flowing based upon the science, the data, and the information that's coming to us. I don't want us to say today, the buildings are closed for the school year, period, end of story. I don't want that.
I think the bottom
Happy
line,
to revisit it every meeting.
yeah, I think the bottom line for me is that, you know, for safety reasons, my kids right now wouldn't be going to any activities held in groups anyway. So I definitely see the safety part of it, that we might want to limit activities.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on this point?
I like the idea of revisiting it at least once a month.
I think we have to have a better idea of how many organizations, groups, activities we're talking about, because I don't think really anything can be decided on without looking at it. Look at tonight's, you know, ideas of knowing that we were talking about football and what specific sports we were talking about. I think it's a little bit too difficult to have any kind of plan until we have that to look at, and then move from there each week for how often we would revisit.
Yeah, I agree. I would just hope that we could find some sort of consistent rules to apply, so that we're not making, you know, judgment calls.
Right.
Or like, you know.
Yeah, but
right.
Yeah, I think it's also important to look at, though, with those organizations and with those clubs, who is involved in those? Are those all students from the North Hill School District? Are they all coaches from the North Hill School District? Are there no volunteers that come in? You know, where those people are hired through and where the kids are coming from. I think that's another important point to look at.
I mean, it is, but I also don't like getting into the kind of situation where we're, I don't know, it just feels a little judgmental, like our students versus other students. I get your point, but I don't know.
And also, I guess this is sort of what Phil was saying too, but any of the clubs that can make their things happen, that their events happen outdoors, particularly in the early part of the school year, I would think, you know, they can, I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we'd be happy for people to be creative about that sort of thing. I'm imagining chess club outdoors, but
I do think that the parent teacher organizations have, I don't want to act like I'm their spokesperson at all, but I do think that they have some valid concerns about, you know, whether or not they want parent volunteers, you know, having to comply or make sure they're meeting CDC guidelines or regulations. I also think there might be an insurance component to it. I know the PTAs and PTOs have to carry insurance. I don't know if COVID requires a separate insurance waiver. I don't have the answers to that. Annette just messaged me a question. Maybe she's not able to speak.
Sure. Hi.
Oh,
I can
okay.
speak, I just can't do the video. What is there any possibility that we would be asking these outside groups to adhere to the guidelines? You know, for example, the guidelines that we're following for our athletics and activities. Was that how were you thinking about that, Pat? Because it sounds like there could be like one set of rules. You know, depending on how we handle this, there could be one set of rules that we're following and another set of rules that a club is following, and where would the consistency be?
It would be a lot like what Pat Weber's presentation said about outside organizations using our athletic facilities. They must follow the details of our plan. And I would, if we decided to go this route, that would be something that each group would have to basically explain that this is how they're going to follow their meetings based upon the space that they're in or whatever it might be. So it would be the same.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this topic before we move on? Okay, so next we will move on to public comments on non-agenda items. And I would just like to quickly repeat what I said at the beginning of the meeting, which is that we will be limiting comments to 3 minutes. Mrs. Pellet will run a timer for us, and she will give you a heads up when you have about 30 seconds left. Comments are limited to taxpayers, residents, or employees of the district. And if you do have a comment, please feel free to raise your hand virtually, and I will bring you up to speak at the meeting. Okay, it looks like we have several comments. I'm just going to go in the order that they have appeared. So first is Tony Reed. Mrs. Reed, are you there?
Yes.
Thank you. Could you please state your full name and address for the record before your comment? And Mrs. Pellet, will you be running the timer? Thank you.
Tony Reed, 208 Oakwood Avenue. Just a quick question on what about the medical exemption? How is that going to work for kids who can't physically wear a mask? What would be needed for that?
That's a very good question. And that's one of the parts that we're working on that right now. That's one that we're going to have to get the guidance from CDC. But just like any exemption that we need to make for the education of a student, we would absolutely make those types of exemptions. So there's, you know, different 504 plans if a student would break their arm. There's a whole lot of things that we can follow under already established federal and state mandates to help students that need accommodations for any of the requirements that we have. So right now we're working through those, again, with CDC guidelines. I don't have an answer. I'm sorry, I don't just have the answer this time, because that is something that's difficult as we're kind of progressing through this to know and understand which direction we could and should be going, that there may be accommodations for students based upon accommodations that we can provide, and there may not be accommodations for students based upon accommodations that we can't provide. But there are laws and there are rules that will protect our students who have that need accommodations. So we will be following those.
But will those students have to currently have some sort of other special accommodation, or could this truly just be a medical or mental health issue that wouldn't allow it?
So medical and mental health would fall under 504. It would make them eligible for an accommodation. So
Okay.
That makes sense. So it's no, they do not have to have a previous accommodation available to them.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Next, we have Sonia Welch.
Hi, yeah, this is Dr. Sonia Welch. I'm at 461 Goldsmith Road. I was wanting to understand and thinking through the masking of the children and the goal of coming back to school in the traditional way. I was thinking that for high school students and junior high students, it's still taxing, but you know, they can handle wearing a mask for a full school day. But for young children, it just seems, you know, very like it might be very stressful. And so I was curious about the decision to make the traditional model of attending school the goal. I was wondering about why not start with the hybrid. And part of that question includes, Dr. Mandarino, your comment was that virtual school does not count as a school day in the eyes of the state. And I wondered how FID days were able to be approved, and could we just increase those?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And that's part of my frustrations right now. And I mentioned that all of those relief efforts expired today. And so that hybrid model is actually not permitted by the state of Pennsylvania either at this point. And again, we know that things can change between now and the beginning of the school year, but that's why the main focus is to get our students back into a traditional setting. We're in the PDE plan, we have the option to select those different options. So I'm hopeful that there would be some sort of relief coming to us, but there's not right now. And that's why we are really trying to plan for all of those options and all those models. The masking of students is something that we're wrestling with on a regular basis. And again, that's why tonight's plan was preliminary. And the idea might change in 2 weeks. So that's how this is sort of evolving. But we are approved for 5 flexible instructional days each year until 2023. That's the way the law was written. I asked last year, as we were coming through the crisis in April or May, if that could be extended, those numbers could be extended, because we just did 48 flexible instructional days last year. That has not been granted to schools either. So those are all excellent questions, because those are things that I've personally been thinking about and hopeful that those could change for us as far as the legislator and the Department of Education is concerned, but they have not. And so as of today, if we were required to open school tomorrow, a virtual or a hybrid plan would not be deemed a legal instructional activity by the state of Pennsylvania, which means that we would not be able to meet the 180-day requirement. And at that point, there's consequences to the school district. So again, it's 2 months from now. I'm hopeful that there are different ideas that come about. I'm hopeful that the state of Pennsylvania is looking for us to develop plans like this to kind of give to the Department of Ed, to take to the legislature to see these are the things that the school districts are thinking in order to keep the students safe and the staff safe as they operate their schools, and then get some relief. But right now, it looks as though the state's requiring us to open school, go back to school, and make sure that everybody is as healthy and safe as they can be while students are in school.
Thank you. May I ask an additional question?
Sure.
If you have a family member of a staff or a student, or a staff or a student who has a positive COVID test, will the determination of what the school does for that be up to the Department of Health as well, or only if, I don't forget the words you used, but only if we have like a COVID crisis?
No, I would call the Department of Health for
Okay.
everyone and get their guidance. I think Pat Weber said it best when he said, I am not a medical professional. I am not a medical professional. And so I am really, in cases like this, going to have to lean on the Department of Health for their guidance and direction as to what we do based upon the circumstances and the situation that we're in at the time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Welch.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ed Vesley. Mr. Vesley, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, I believe I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, yes. Can you please state
Ed
your name and address?
Besley, 116 Lingay Drive. I have a couple questions. One is kind of first a comment for your discussion, and I'd like you to do that second so we could try to address my second question first. So my second question is, one thing about facilities that should be considered is what boosters typically do, which is run concession stands. To me, that's a playground for germs, so that's something that needs to be discussed. The second item is really for both Dr. Manarino and Mr. Weber. I'm trying to line up what our club sport is going to do in the fall, as we are a fall sport. And so I'm sure at this point you've had discussions or have gotten some guidance from the PIAA. So Mr. Weber said that there is a PIAA guidance document. I have not found that on the website. So Patrick, if you could email that to me tomorrow, I would really appreciate it because it could answer a lot of my questions. But the main question I have is when we get to the point, and assume we're still green, we're going to get to the point that we're going to have interscholastic competitions. And under that scenario, I see conflicting plans. So I'm going to use Cannon McMillan School District, which I read their plan online, and it seemed like they're going to open with no restrictions whatsoever. So you have a school district like North Hills maybe scheduled to play Cannon McMillan, and you go to their facility. Are we required to meet their requirements, vice versa? Is there a forfeit involved if you don't think it's safe for your students? How do we all see this playing out? There must be some guidance to this point from the PIA.
Those are all excellent questions, Ed. And I believe you know that I sit on the PIAA board. The PIAA workshop is July 17th and 18th, I believe. And that's the main topic of discussion across the state is exactly what you just said. Because that's sort of, if you recall, when March was kind of evolving, we were right in the middle of the basketball tournament. And you had teams from Western Pennsylvania, as we were in the PIAA tournament, say, I am not going to the eastern part of the state to play that team because it's located in a county that already has multiple cases of the coronavirus. That was the beginning of the end of the PIAA playoffs. And so you have that already from the beginning. And so now as we're kind of, again, evolving through this, the PIAA has not come out with any guidance or directions on that. The expectation would be to participate in all section games. And that's just sort of where it is right now from communication, again, from the WPIAL. But there's limited guidance from the PIAA. Pat, if you don't have that, I do, from the emails from Jen Gressel from the PIAA, and I can certainly send those to Mr. Vesley if you don't have them. But Ed, right now, we're flying blind, and that's the scariest part about this. So I guess for a group like Club Slow Pitch Softball, I would just plan to have that activity for our students, and then based upon the teams that you're playing, we make the decision about whether we should go because of the health and safety of our student athletes and putting them into that situation. As an athlete and parent of athletes, it's killing me to think that these are the things that we're going to have to eliminate from the student experience of the high school. And I don't want to do that at all. And so, you know, we want those opportunities for kids, and we want to celebrate those championships that you bring to the board meeting, Ed. It's so we want to find a way that we can keep the board, or we can keep the activities going, we can keep the schools open, and we can keep the students in those things that we know are important to their experiences in our schools. But right now, there's really nothing guiding us. And I'm happy to talk to you along the way. Call me in July, and you know, we get the later part of July, and if I have any information from them, I'm happy to share it with you so that you can make the right decisions for our club softball kids.
So let me follow up with one thing if I'm not out of time. And the one concern is I saw the plan that you lined out for activities up through basically the start of interscholastic. But one of my concerns, just looking at the big picture, is I have potentially, 20 kids coming to a game. And if I have to test them for their temperature or have them fill out our form, that becomes a paperwork nightmare. Because just rounding them up and getting the coaches all to do it, I realize, we're all professionals and we should do it, but whether I can really execute that plan looks like it would be really difficult. And I don't expect a comment tonight. I'm just telling you that's one of my biggest concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Presley. Next, we have Jennifer Duffy. Mrs. Duffy, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, can you hear me now?
I can. Hi, can you please state your name and address?
Jennifer Duffy, 16 East Orchard Avenue, 15202. This is more for Pat Weber. I just needed clarification on North Hills youth branded sports, whether or not they're allowed to use solely outside facilities, namely Ross Turf or Martorelli practice field, say not even for against other teams, but say clinics or practices with ourselves.
Yeah, Ms. Duffy, at this point, towards the end of, or at the end of my facility usage, I guess, moving forward with those outside spaces, those groups would have to submit their plan to follow our plan for approval to use those outside spaces. So that's where that stands currently.
So if, say, I'm on a board for one of our youth sports, if we would like to use an outside facility like the turf, we would need to submit a formal proposal.
That's correct. Yes, it would just it would just be an outline of how you're going to meet our safety guidelines of the overall plan. And I would reference my presentation that is on the agenda of, you know, the plan requirements, one of the first few slides of who's the point of contact, how you're cleaning and sanitizing, if that is, you know, applicable, and some of the other measures that we are taking in our plan. And then once that's sent to me, you know, we can move further in approving that for you guys to then use our facilities.
Okay, so just as a follow-up, everyone seemed kind of excited when they're like, we're not going to allow all these clubs inside, they can go outside. All these same clubs would still have to submit, you know, a plan before they'd be allowed to even use outside facilities.
That's correct.
And we'll help you do that plan if you need some help. But, you know, Pat and I have already done a lot of the work in those two plans. We know it's necessary for those plans to be successful, and we're happy to help you work on those if you need some help with us, or if you want to see the documents that we have, we're happy to send those to you so that your board can at least discuss what they look like, to provide the appropriate waivers and do those types of things that are happening in youth sports all across the country here.
Thank you, Mrs. Duffy. Jessica McDonald is next. If you don't mind unmuting yourself and stating your name and address, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Jessica McDonald. I live at 1000 Grandview Avenue. My question is what's the plan for special education students if they do the hybrid or, you know, have to shut down again? I do appreciate everything that the teachers did, but I felt like the special education students were forgotten.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I know that Dr. Bazilla is working on that plan for our special education students. And that would be something that I'd suggest you call her office and discuss with her, because the plan would change for different disabilities. So if a life skills student or an autistic support student in a hybrid plan, I believe that they're here every day. And so it depends upon what the disability is. And I know that Dr. Bazilla has plans for all day in-person instruction for different populations of special education students. And so I just suggest you call her and the two of you can talk through what the plan would be for your specific children or your specific needs. But the plan, for the most part, if we are permitted to have in-person instruction, we're looking to do more in-person instruction for our most needy learning disability students.
Okay. I just know my daughter needs pretty much one-on-one, and virtual just wasn't cutting it.
Sure.
That answers my question, really.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
You too.
We have one more question from Dr. Welch.
Hi guys, sorry to take up more time, but I just looked at a calendar, so I would love a point of clarification, please. The school year is going to start on 8/25, and you won't know until 2 weeks prior, or you won't really announce finally until 2 weeks prior what type of opening we'll have. So that puts us at maybe the 11th at the earliest, but we have to sign up for cyber school if we're going to do it no later than the 10th. Is that correct?
It's a great question. What we're going to do is follow our school board meetings. So our school board meeting is scheduled for August 6th. And so on August 6th, we will make that announcement as to the direction that the district is going to open, so that the decision will be made before the online academy applications close.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any additional public comments. So I would then just like to announce that the next meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for Thursday, July 23rd, 2020 at 7 p.m. As of right now, we are planning on holding it in person at the North Hills Middle School LGI room. Masks will be required for all attendees. And I would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second
that motion.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening, everyone.